Sarah didn't know what to do. She looked down at her feet, wishing with every inch of what she was made of that the world would just swallow her, and she could simply not exist at that moment. What she had done was terrible. She knew it, and she admitted it. She knew it was her fault, but it was an accident. She never would have wanted it to happen, not even in a million years. But a mistake as such was one not to be made. No matter how flawed man is, there are mistakes that are forbidden, such as dropping your little baby brother in a river by accident, resulting in his death. Sarah was a 15-year-old girl who lived in a little house in the middle of the woods. Not in the middle per se, but she did live in an area surrounded by trees. It was beautiful, the area around it. There was a river that ran down near their house, a little pond right outside it where ducks and frogs would occasionally visit. A large apple tree stood, inviting the birds to come and rest, and the sun shone brightly through the leaves. It was a perfect setting for a life with her parents and younger brother. But then it happened. Sarah had taken her little brother out to play in the river one day when she slipped on some rocks and accidentally dropped him into the water. Her screams filled the air as she watched helplessly as he floated away, his little body disappearing instantly. Her dad never said much after that day, but Sarah knew he blamed her for what had happened. She heard his cries inside their home during those 3 days, knowing that nothing she could say would make it any better or erase what had happened. She had a hard time looking at her own self in the mirror. It was difficult, living with a sin as such. For days she didn't eat, only drank sips of water, and didn't sleep. She herself was close to death. Her father didn't bother to help her, but her mother did. Her mother would constantly knock at her door, whispering assuring words of lies. "It's okay. It's not your fault." It's not okay, and it is my fault, Sarah thought to herself. She knew secretly even her mother was disgusted by her. Due to her actions, not only did she break internally, but her family as well. One reason she couldn't sleep was because of the noise from her parents. Every night she would hear her mother arguing with her father, telling him to stop treating Sarah like he was. She shouted at him about how she didn't want to lose both of her children. She doesn't know what happened after, but when she woke up, she saw them sleeping together, arms wrapped around one another. She was grateful for that their relationship wasn't necessarily deteriorating. They genuinely did love each other. Sarah never found the courage to apologize to her dad. She wanted to, but the words wouldn't come out of her mouth every time she tried. Sarah was scared of upsetting him even more and knew that if she did, he might resent her. So instead, she apologized in her heart and continued living with heavy guilt on her shoulders. But despite all this, Sarah still had hope for what was left of their family. A lot changed after that day. The house looked duller, and nobody laughed as much anymore. But at least they were still together, and that kept Sarah hanging on. Life wasn't perfect for them anymore, but it wasn't completely broken either. And for that, Sarah stayed thankful. No one touched Desmond's room. It was almost an unspoken rule not to enter the room. Life had been burdensome, especially for Sarah. She continued attending school, but her grades were dropping, and people kept whispering about her. Sometimes she wished she could simply disappear and go up to the sky to be one with the stars. It wasn't just the students, but the teachers too. No one treated her the same anymore. The teachers always kept an eye on her, as if she would break down at any second, or as if she would push someone into a river. Loneliness is a word that wouldn't do justice to how she felt. Sarah missed her brother. She missed Desmond with all her heart. She wished he was here with her. She wanted to hug him and tell him things would be all right. But a part of her knew that it wasn't true. She could still feel his presence in the home, haunting her for her sin. Despite her guilt, she just wanted to be with him. He was only a baby, just 2 years old. But as soon as he was born, she knew it was love at first sight. She knew that she would love him always, unconditionally. It was the middle of the night, on a day when she decided to enter Desmond's room. As she stepped into it, she was struck with his familiar baby cologne fragrance. Nostalgia washed over her as she walked into his room with quiet steps. She touched his belongings, playing with his toys he once used to hug. She wished she could turn back time and have him back in her life. But even though Desmond was gone, Sarah's love for him remained constant and sincere. Even if they were apart, she knew he would always be a part of her heart. No matter what happened, she would never forget him. She continued living with the guilt, not just for his death, but for all the moments she'll miss out on having with him. Because no matter how much pain it caused her, Sarah loved Desmond more than anything else in this world, and that was enough to keep the hope alive. Before she knew it, she had fallen asleep on his bedroom floor while hugging his favorite blanket. She didn't think she had slept well in a while, but her awakening was not the greatest. She awoke to her father's steaming hot face as he grabbed the blanket away from her. Sarah shifted backward, away from him, her eyes full of fear. She gulped as she watched her father clench the blanket in his hands, steam quite literally coming out of his ears and nose. "How dare you?" he asked harshly. "You, of everyone, to be holding onto his blanket." Sarah felt the tears on her cheeks. I'm sorry. I really didn't mean to." "Oh, like how you didn't mean to kill your baby brother?" her father shouted, his chest heaving up and down, his anger evident. Just then her mother entered, worry written all over her face. Worry for her husband, for her daughter, for their family. She pulled him out of the room, leaving Sarah on the floor, forced to come to terms with reality. She was truly alone, and it was all her fault. Life returned to what it was. Her father had been colder than ever after the incident, and years passed by, but winter in their house never seemed to leave. The cold never left. But Sarah never lost hope. She continued going to school, and despite the whispers, she worked hard. She had a goal, to make something of herself that would make her brother proud. With each passing day, the pain lessened from her heart, and eventually, she was able to shed tears for Desmond without being completely consumed by guilt. She knew that though they were apart, his spirit watched over her every move, even when all seemed hopeless. Through thick and thin, Sarah remembered why she kept going. It was all for Desmond's memory. The only thing she couldn't succeed in was breaking the icicles in the house, the snow. She wished it would go away, but she didn't know how to get rid of it. But life, as usual, was full of surprises. Everything changed one day, though, when her father had a heart attack. Luckily, he survived. But Sarah remembered the day vividly. How terrified she had been. She didn't know what to do. With trembling fingers, she called the hospital and her mother, who had been at work, and updated her on the situation. Her mother rushed to the hospital immediately, while Sarah was left alone at home. Being alone in the house at that moment made her realize how it would feel once both her parents were gone. It terrified her, made her feel hopeless, even. But she knew that was reality, and it could happen any day. When she got a phone call saying her father had survived, all she could do was thank the Lord for saving him. She didn't know what she would do if her father had died without apologizing, without making amends for what she did, and to lose him would have simply killed her. The experience made Sarah realize how fragile life is, and how important it is to live each moment as if it was your last. She knew that she could no longer take anything for granted, not even things like a simple apology. So after much thought, Sarah mustered up the courage to confront her father and apologize for her actions. She made her way to the hospital, and as soon as she saw her father, smiling and talking to the doctor, she felt her heart crumble into shreds. He was alive. He was really alive, and that was all that mattered to her. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she sniffed several times as she made her way to her father. He looked at her, his eyes full of surprise and then warmth. He knew why she was there, and without saying a word, he took her in his arms and held her tightly, not wanting to let go even for a moment. Sarah knew that everything was all right now. She had finally made amends with her father. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry," Sarah sobbed as she held her father. She hadn't come within a span of 5 feet close to him ever since the incident, and despite this, it didn't feel foreign to her. It only felt like she returned home, when she was in his arms. He hugged her back, rubbing her head and shoulders as reassuringly as he could. "I know, sweetheart. I understand. I'm sorry, too," he whispered into her ear, and she could feel his grip becoming tighter by the second. They stayed like that for a while until Sarah's mom walked in on them, surprised and yet happy to see them both together. Sarah was relieved and grateful that after so much pain and guilt, she finally had the courage to apologize to her father, which was something that seemed impossible all this time. She realized how important it is to have family close by, even if things aren't always perfect between you. Just an apology was not enough, though. She wanted to make it right. She wanted her dad to forgive her and for the family to be able to move on from this tragedy, so she took it upon herself to do something about it. She decided that she would do good deeds in honor of her brother's memory, doing acts of charity and kindness whenever and wherever they were needed, no matter how small or insignificant they may seem. And that was what Sarah did. For years, she dedicated her time and energy into helping others, trying her best always to make sure that at least one person was better off than when she found them. And every day, as Sarah saw the world around her made a little brighter by her actions, and it was always for Desmond, and always would be.